there, my name's Megan and I work for Arizona Raft Adventures, or AZRA for short. Here are your adventure tips of a lifetime for today. I'm going to be talking about the top 10 tips for planning a rafting trip, and this is going to be specifically for Grand Canyon, but really these tips work for pretty much any other rafting trip that you're wanting to look into. My first tip, even though this isn't part of the top 10, is going to be about specifically choosing rafting Grand Canyon or the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon as your first and only trip. If this is the only rafting trip that you've ever done or wanting to do, I'm going to recommend that you start here or join us if you've done other rafting trips before. This trip is just so amazing. Not only is the rafting itself super fun, but the view and the scenery and everything that you see in Grand Canyon is just absolutely stunning. And so I highly recommend that you try Grand Canyon rafting before anything else. But again, these tips are going to be completely relevant to any other rafting trip that you're going to look at across the country or even across the world. But I am going to specifically talk about all of us Grand Canyon rafting outfitters just because that's where I work. Okay, so tip number 1 is going to be about researching all of the companies and all of their trip types, all their trip options and everything. There are 16 of us Grand Canyon rafting outfitters, though some of us actually hold a couple of those permits. So for example, we own 3 of them. We're Arizona Raft Adventures, Grand Canyon Raft Adventures, and Grand Canyon Discovery if you were to look up the list of all the outfitters out there. So we actually function as one under the name Arizona Raft Adventures, but there are technically 3 of our permits. And there are other companies that do the exact same thing. But technically, there are 16 of us outfitters, and we all do offer slightly different logistics. We offer different trip types, different lengths. All of that kind of stuff is something that you'll want to look into because some of us are in and out of Flagstaff, Arizona. Some are in and out of Las Vegas, Nevada. Some are out of Phoenix, Arizona. So there are lots of logistics there. And then some of us offer motor trips. Some of us offer all different types of trips with all different types of boats, which we're one of those outfitters. And I'll talk about that soon in one of the later tips. But there are just lots of different lengths of trips that we do as well, different places that we end our trips, different places that we begin our trips. And so there's just a lot of different logistics that you want to look into for all of the different types of outfitters that are out there. One thing to be said though, is that we are all contracted through the National Park Service. And so we are all heavily regulated by all of our rules. We have very highly trained guides, super professional staff, and we all just love what we do. Again, we're all great outfitters. We all offer something slightly different, so just find the one that's going to work best for you. Of course, we do think that our trips, we run them the way that we do because we think that it's the best adventure in Grand Canyon and the best option for you. But we also realize that not all of our trip types and lengths and adventures are going to be the right fit for you. So go ahead and start looking through all of those different outfitters and seeing which one works best for you. Okay. So point number 2 is decide when you would like to go rafting. And also we have questions that come up about like how far in advance you have to reserve, and so we can talk about that a little bit here too. But just so you know, our commercial rafting season, so for all of us 16 outfitters, our commercial rafting season is April to October. And within that, we can only launch motor trips from April to September 15th. So once you're past that September 15th and into October threshold, there's only going to be non-motorized trips on the water. And so that's just an important thing to just recognize as you're looking into trips. So while we're talking about different types of weather and everything like that, between April and October, we have some cooler weather, which is cool for Grand Canyon. And then we also have some pretty warm, toasty weather that's going to be in the middle of our season in the summertime. And I just like to tell people all the time that we are really good at managing these temperatures. And that's across the board for all of us outfitters. We know how to deal with the heat. We know how to deal with the cold. We recommend that in your packing list that we'll send to you, we recommend certain gear that's going to help you prepare for either the cold or the heat. And so it's really important to just recognize that this is what we do. We raft April to October, that is our season. So we know how to deal with the cold. We know how to deal with the heat. We know how to deal with rainstorms and hailstorms and things like that that can occur on your trip. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at all the different times of year that you can go and the different types of weather. If you talk to any one of us in the office here at AZRA, we would all tell you different months that we prefer because they all have their different pros and their different cons. And ultimately, what I tell people all the time, this is a tip that's not actually on this list, is to just go when there's a space available for you and when the timing works for your calendar. Sure, there might be a more ideal time that you would prefer to have for weather-wise, but it doesn't necessarily mean that any other time of year that has availability isn't going to be a great time of year for you to go. Every single month has some really great pros, and every single month has some cons to it too. So with that, I'll kind of go over the typical weather to expect for every month in Grand Canyon on our commercial rafting season. So April is probably going to be our coldest and chilliest and potentially rainy month too. We don't always have a lot of rain in April, but it could still be raining if we're having like an extended springtime here in Arizona. And so the typical weather that you're going to see in April is going to be like your highs in the mid, even sometimes low to mid 80s or so for your high. And then the lows are going to be probably in the mid 50s. And this is all in Fahrenheit. And so just recognize that you're going to have kind of extremes in weather in April. There are going to be days where you're going to be pretty warm because that sun is going to be nice and on you and heating you up. And then there are going to be times where you're going through the cold river water, which is on average 52 degrees. It's going to be splashing you in the early daylight time when you don't have a whole lot of sun on you, and it can make you cold really easily. And so just be aware that all of our trips, you're going to have extremes of hot and cold, wet and dry throughout every single day. So that's the typical weather for April. For May, you're going to see it's a pretty variable month, honestly. So May is going to have typically weather in like the upper 80s, mid 90s. Sometimes we even do see it in the hundreds by that point in time. But most of the time, what you're going to see is going to be more the like mid to upper 90s. That's most common. And then for the lows, you're going to see those in the 60s or so. So it's really pretty comfortable. May is our really variable month. We could have an extended spring that's making it a little bit cooler still. And then we could have a longer or an earlier summer where it starts heating up pretty early. So just be aware of that. May is a pretty variable month that we never totally know exactly what to expect weather-wise, but it's also a beautiful time of year for sure. And then June, we call June the hottest month down there. And that's specifically the later half of June. But the reason for that is because you're going to have highs well into the hundreds. So you're thinking like somewhere between 100 to 115 sometimes in June. That's just going to be pretty standard. And that's pretty normal for what we experience. People ask all the time if we cancel trips for the heat. Like I said earlier, we don't, because we're just used to dealing with it. You use that 52-degree river water to cool you down, and it makes you feel so much better. And so that's going to be the highs. And then the lows in June are going to be about like the upper to mid 80s. So, and that's at like 3 o'clock in the morning. So think about that. You could still be going to bed when it's like in the 90s still, for sure. Again, we use that river water to keep you cool that time of year. June and July are pretty standard for that same temperature. The main difference between July and August and compared to June is that it is technically our monsoon season here in Arizona. So what that means is that even though we're going to have warm and toasty days, there's a possibility that throughout the late morning, early afternoon, and even into the evening and well into the night, we could have clouds build up. You could have sometimes just a cloudy day that makes it feel a whole lot cooler than it is outside. And then sometimes you're going to have a huge downpour of lots of rain that cools you off. Sometimes you just have a little bit of sprinkling, and sometimes you just have kind of a light rain. But the nice part about the monsoon season is that even though it's warm outside, that cloud coverage that comes in throughout the day really actually makes it feel a lot cooler, and it can cool the evenings off as well. Still well in the hundreds for sure, but it feels so much cooler in Arizona when those clouds come over. So June, July, and August temperature-wise are about the same. July and August are just going to be a little bit different with having that potential cloud coverage and potential rain that's going to happen. And then September is starting to cool down. Beginning of September can still be a little toasty, but middle to end of September is going to start cooling down, and you're going to be probably more in the like upper 90s, maybe even to the mid 90s as you're going later into the month. And then the lows are going to be in probably the low 80s or so. That's going to be most common, maybe even into the upper 70s at night. Just kind of depends on what's coming through. Technically, that beginning of September is still the monsoon season in Arizona. And so you could still see some rain or that cloud coverage. But it's just a generally nice time of year for sure. September is a very popular month, absolutely, to go rafting. It does fill up quicker because of that, though. And so, again, it's one of those months that absolutely sounds ideal on paper and is a lovely time to be down there. But if there's no availability for you to go, try another time of year that will work for your schedule so that you can make that work out. And then October, we technically run trips like the first through the middle half of October, with our trips ending at the end of October. And so you're going to see cooler temperatures around then. You're going to be seeing probably maybe into the low 90s at the beginning of October, but mostly in the mid 80s or so for the highs. And then the lows again are going to be pretty similar to April, where you're going to see those like mid 50s, maybe even to the low 60s. Really comfortable for sleeping. Really comfortable for hiking, all that kind of stuff. And so, like I said, every single month is an amazing time to go down there. When it's cold, you don't really want to bathe too much in the river. You don't really want to play in the side streams because it's just too cold. You just don't really want to get too wet. But the trade-off is that it's nice and cool, so you don't really feel too hot and you don't have to get into the river water to cool down. The perks of the summertime is that we take you to so many side streams and waterfalls, and it's just a joy to go and experience those. And it's just super fun to play in the river a little bit more too that time of year. April is really beautiful because we'll usually have wildflowers in April, so that's a lovely time of year to go. The summertime is a great time for families to travel with us, and so we have a lot of kids who add so much fun to a trip and just a whole lot of different energy to a trip. That's just a really fun experience. And so those are pretty much the standard and typical weather patterns that we see in Grand Canyon during our rafting season. Obviously, these are just general and they change a little bit every year, but those are the standard that you're going to be able to expect. All right, on to tip number 3. This is where we're going to talk about the different trip types and lengths that you want to do, because that's going to be your next step, is to figuring out what type of trip that you want to do, what length of trip that you want to do. And I am going to specifically talk about our trips here because I don't actually know all of the different details for all the other outfitters in Grand Canyon, though I know a little bit about some of them. But here I'm going to specifically talk about Azra's trip types and lengths and everything like that. So we have 3 different trip types that we do every single year. We have our classic adventure, our all paddle adventure, and our motor adventure. And so with these 3 trip types, every single trip is going to have a different feel to it, different types of boats, different lengths, and everything like that. So just to explain a little bit how Grand Canyon works. Grand Canyon is a very remote area, in case you didn't already know that. There's a lot of people who don't necessarily realize how remote Grand Canyon is. There is one place where you can drive to the Grand Canyon to start a trip, and that's at River Mile 0 at Lee's Ferry. So all of the Grand Canyon rafting trips for everybody begin there. Every single boat has to launch at Lee's Ferry, River Mile 0. That's where all of our trips start. And then the next location where you can actually drive a vehicle down to the river is 226 river miles downstream at a place called Diamond Creek. All of our trips end at Diamond Creek. So every single one of our trips are going to actually go the whole 226 river miles. So our classic adventure is going to be either a 14-day trip, which is most of the time, or a 16-day trip. Our 16-day trips are going to be in like the first couple weeks of April and then end of September into October. And the main reason that we do that is because theoretically, the river actually runs with less water in it that time of year. So April, sometimes a little bit into May, but mostly that beginning of April and then end of September and October, the river runs a little bit lower, so we can't make as much mileage in that amount of time. The other reason, too, that we have a little bit longer of a trip is that the daylight hours are shorter. And so we can't make as many river miles when the daylight hours are shorter and still do as much hiking as we'd like to do. As a company, that's something that we really pride ourselves in, is the amount of hiking that we do on our trips. So a 14 or 16-day trip is what you're going to be looking at for both our classic adventure and our all paddle adventure. Now, the way to make those 2 trips shorter is that you can hike out on day 6 for a 14-day trip or day 7 for a 16-day trip, and you will hike out on the Bright Angel Trail. And this is a 7.5-mile hike and about a mile elevation change along the way, and so it's something that you need to be very physically fit to be able to do. So that's just a little bit of background information. I'm going to make another video about that at some point in time to talk more a little about the Bright Angel Trail, and we also have how to pack for the Bright Angel Trail videos that already exist too, which I will put in the description below. Now, the other thing you can do, so that's going to be on day 6 or 7. On that same day, because some people are hiking out, we are going to have people also hike in on that same day, same trail, and they will do the last portion of the trip and end the trip with everybody else. So that is a 9-day trip when it's our 14-day, and then it's a 10-day trip if it's a 16-day full canyon length. So you can either do the 6 or 7 day upper canyon classic is what we call it, or all paddle trip, or we can do our 9 or 10 day lower canyon classical or all paddle trip. So that's in order to shorten our non-motorized trips. Our motorized trips, though, those are either 8 days, which is our standard length, or 10 days in that early April, September timeframe. And the really cool part about our motor trips is that you get to see the full 226 river miles in that length of time. So for someone who only has a week or so to actually do these trips, our motor adventures are a great option because you get to see the whole river and you don't miss either portion, either the upper or the lower. So that's a really great option for some people. So to explain the actual trips themselves, our classic adventure is going to have standardly 5 oar boats and 1 paddle boat. If available, one of those oar boats will be replaced by a hard-sided dory boat. Those have become increasingly popular over these last few years. Dories are just a really, really fun boat. It's a really fun opportunity to be able to try 3 different boat types on our classic adventures. And most of the time we are able to offer those 3 boat types. There are just times where we aren't able to put a dory on a trip, and so you will have the oar boats. What happens on those boats is that in an oar boat or a dory, there's a guide who sits in the center of that boat with oars, and they are maneuvering the boat downriver. And so you are not just sitting back and relaxing, because a lot of the guides will let you row too, but you are able to enjoy the scenery. You're able to kind of move around on that boat a little bit more. You're able to stand up and take pictures, get your camera a little bit easier access, that kind of stuff. It's a great, great time. And it's really fun when the guides will teach you how to row those boats too. And then that paddle boat, that's a super fun boat where there are 6 paddlers, guests on that trip, who hold a canoe paddle in their hand, and they are helping maneuver the boat downriver with a guide in the back who is basically acting as the rudder and as the paddle captain who is telling you exactly what to do through the rapids and the flat water and stuff like that. That's a super fun boat because you get a little more action where you're actually maneuvering that boat with your own hands and helping it get downstream. The great part about our classic adventure is that every day we recommend you try a different boat. If you really love paddling, then absolutely you can have a chance to stay in that boat most of the time if you'd like. If you think you really want to paddle a lot, but you end up loving the opportunity to sit in the oar boat too, you have that opportunity. So it's really, really great. It's also a great opportunity for mixed groups who maybe have people in your group who are younger and really love to be in the paddle boat, but then you have some people who would prefer to just relax a little bit more in the oar boat. So it's a really great opportunity for lots of different types of experience levels and different types of levels in general in your group. Our all paddle adventure is going to be the most active trip that we offer. That you are going to only be able to be in a paddle boat on that trip, which is super, super fun. So for those people who are truly super active, want to be maneuvering that boat downstream, that's all they want to do on these trips, which I completely understand. This is the trip for you. We do offer those in May, June, July, and August only, and we only offer 1 trip each month of those. They're kind of considered one of our specialty trips. So those do fill up pretty quickly, and people just have a blast on those. What happens on those is there's 3 paddle boats, sometimes 4 paddle boats, and then there's 3 oar boats on that trip as well, because the paddle boats don't carry a whole lot of gear. So we have to have the oar boats on those trips to be able to carry the gear as well. So that's a synopsis of our all paddle adventure. And then our motor adventures are such a special treat, in my opinion. It's also the first trip that I ever went on in Grand Canyon, so it's a little bit near and dear to my heart, which I appreciate the motor trips a lot. So we have a couple of options on those. Sometimes we run a 1-boat motor where it's just like it sounds, where there's only going to be 1 motor boat. These are large motor boats that carry on average about 12 people on them. And then the guide is in the very, very back with a motor that sits down below the boat and out the back. And they're literally motoring that boat downstream, which is why we can make so many more river miles and why you can do the 226 river miles in 8 or 10 days. It just, you can make more miles because of that motor. So our 1-boat motor is going to have 1 motorboat on it with 3 guides total. And then our 2-boat motors are going to have 2 motorboats on them, and we'll have on average 5 guides on those trips, and they are maneuvering that boat downriver with that motor. And so on average, we're going to have about 24 people on those trips or so, because we can do about 12 on each of those motorboats. On all of our trips, I recommend that you flip around on the different types of boats, on the different types of boats, on the different types of guides, because all of our guides are going to have really great interpretation skills. They're going to know a little bit of different things. They're going to be kind of specialists in different things. And so they all have different personalities that are just truly unique and truly fun to be able to get to know them. And so I highly recommend, no matter which trip type you go on, that you try out the different boats and the different guides, and that you take time to make that happen. Okay, tip number 4 is to contact the outfitters with any and all questions. Again, I can't really speak on behalf of all of the outfitters, though I do know quite a few of the other office members for the other outfitters. But I do know that here at Azra, we absolutely pride ourselves in having great customer service and helping you with any question, literally, that you could possibly come up with. We have probably heard it all. There is every once in a while still a new question that I haven't heard come up, but it's pretty rare. Ultimately, we've probably heard every single question you could possibly come up with. So don't be afraid to ask. We are absolutely happy to help. And we want you to feel comfortable and confident to do a trip like this. We want you to feel comfortable and confident with the information that you have to be able to make the best choice for you. And so contact us so we can help you. Here at Azra, you can email us, you can call us, and you will absolutely talk to a real person right away. You can text us, and we do have, it's literally me or someone else in the office that is texting you back. We also have chat feature on our website too that you can chat with us. And again, that's one of us in the office that's doing it. So we all work here in Flagstaff, Arizona in our office, and we are a very tight-knit office who really just wants to provide the best customer experience for you possible. So don't be afraid to give us a call back. We also have all done this trip many times. In fact, one of our office employees here was a guide for many, many years. So we've all done this trip before. We know all the details that you could possibly need. We know the answers to all of the questions that you have, and we're absolutely happy to give you our feedback and our experience so that we can help you feel confident in whatever decision you make to join us on a rafting trip. Step number 5, or tip number 5, is to make your reservation. And this is going to look a little bit different for every single company, but most of us have an online reservation system that works pretty easily. So you can absolutely make a reservation with Arizona Raft Adventures online. You can give us a call. You can even email us. However is easiest for you to get a hold of us, absolutely go ahead and contact us that way, and we are absolutely happy to help you. To go a little bit into like when you need to reserve these trips with us or other outfitters, because I didn't talk about that earlier. Typically, Grand Canyon, you want to reserve about a year in advance. And that's specifically if there's a specific time frame that you really, really want to go. I highly recommend looking into it at least a year in advance. We tend to open our reservations about a year and in 4 months or so in advance. For example, we'll have opening day for the 2026 rafting season in January of 2025, and so we're a little bit over a year out. You can absolutely make that reservation that far out, especially if you're wanting to go in like April, September, October, because those trips do fill up so quickly. That would be my recommendation for that. Now, if you're wanting to go any other time of year, June, July, August, even sometimes May, you can likely find space available, especially with Azra right now as I'm doing this recording, which is in January or July of 2024. We do have space here and there that we can get you on for next year in 2025 for sure. That being said, we're a little bit slower in our industry right now, and so there's a possibility that that will get much busier. There used to be years when I worked here that we would be pretty much full on our opening day for the entire season. So my recommendation is, if this is something that you're wanting to do, start thinking about it now if you want to do it in a couple of years, so that you can have all of your information all set up. You know exactly what you want to do. You know exactly when you want to go, what type of trip you want to go on by the time you're ready to actually make that reservation, and our reservations open up to the general public. So that's my tip on that. The other thing that I was going to talk to you about reservations is that every outfitter is going to have a slightly different deposit deadline and the slightly different final payment deadline as well. Some companies will do more of like as you get close to the trip, you have to pay certain amounts. What we do here at Azra is that 10 days prior to your reservation, a deposit is due, and then 4 months prior to your trip date is when your final payment is due. That's for a standard reservation. If you are part of a charter who has filled the entire trip of a trip, then that final payment is going to be due 6 months prior to the trip date. So that's just us. I know there are other companies that have slightly different or even maybe potentially similar payment policies to us, but just know that that's kind of standard. And I will say that it's pretty standard for these final payments and deposits to be non-refundable because we are reserving things so early, and it is pretty difficult for us to fill things last minute, especially if openings open up last minute on a trip, because people are planning these adventures so far in advance. And there's a lot that goes into planning them. So you do have to think about making sure that we recommend trip cancellation insurance through whatever company that you've purchased that through before in the past. We recommend a company called TravelX, but there's plenty of other companies you can look into. We can't recommend enough purchasing trip cancellation insurance to cover your travel investment that this trip truly is. So tip number 5 is to make your reservation, whatever that looks like, with whoever that looks like. Tip number 6 is going to be about reading the materials that are provided. Again, these are one of the things. This is another thing that I can't really talk about how all the other outfitters do it, but I know that everyone's going to provide information to help you prepare for these trips. So my recommendation is to slowly, after you make your reservation, start reading through all of the information, because we at Azra have made some really incredible, super great, very helpful information to help you prepare for this trip. We provide you with information about pre and post trip logistics, where to stay, where to meet up with us, and everything like that. We have a to and from the area document that helps you know exactly how to get to Flagstaff, since our trips are in and out of Flagstaff, Arizona, what shuttle companies exist to help you get here, how to rent a car, where to fly into, and all of that kind of stuff. We also have a really, really very great packing list that we provide you, which is going to be really specific to the time of year that you're going, as well as the type of trip that you're going on. And so we have meticulously gone through that paperwork every single year to improve it based on feedback that have come back in our evals every single year. And we have just made that almost to perfection at this point in time. There's a lot of hyperlinks in there to blogs that we've written over the time to help you prepare for your trip. There's hyperlinks and all of that information to go to our retail store so you can find examples of the gear that we recommend for you. And again, we have gone through that with our own experience on rafting trips to be able to tell you exactly what to take for which time of year you're going on. We also have a specific packing list for those who are hiking in or out, because we don't want you carrying as much gear, so that you can make your hiking pack lighter for that hike in or out. And so all of that stuff has been thought through very, very intentionally to make sure that you have the most accurate and helpful information that you can trust, and that you can go very confidently onto river trips, know that you're going to have everything that you need. And so there's also lots of reading that you can do on our website, on our blog. There's an FAQs page on our website as well that has even more information that you could possibly ever think of. Like, I think that almost any question you can come up with is going to be answered on our FAQs page on our website, which I will link below. And then we have a common questions document that is specific to the type of trip that you're going on, that is also provided to you as soon as you make a reservation with us. And my recommendation on that too is honestly to take our word for it. I do find it sometimes just a little bit funny how people question what information we've put in the packing list or in just our information about whether it should be trusted or not. Trust us, because we have done this many, many times and we know exactly what we're talking about. And we have put all of that information in there super intentionally to make sure that you are well prepared and you will have what you need if you need it. A lot of times we get questions about like, oh, do I really need a rain jacket in June? Understandably, I do understand this question. However, the thing is that even in June, you could still hit rapids early in the morning when it's not very warm outside yet, and you can still get cold. I have actually been the coldest I've ever been on a trip, and I've done every single type of trip that we have and every single time of year that we raft in. And I've been the coldest ever in August on a trip. And that's because it was raining a lot. And so there was just not a whole lot of time for me to get warm. And so a rain jacket is one of those things that if you need it, you will be so grateful you have it, but it also could be something that you don't end up using. However, it's required because if you end up needing it, you need it, and you will be really hurting without it. So again, everything that we've done in all of our paperwork is really intentional to make sure that you have everything you absolutely need if you need it. And then we also make sure that you don't have too much excessive stuff that you won't need in that packing list. So my recommendation is to read through all of the paperwork as tip number 6. All right, tip number 7 is how to start hyping yourself up, honestly. Like, start watching YouTube videos and get excited. There are so many YouTube videos out there right now about rafting in Grand Canyon in general. There's a lot of carnage videos too. The carnage is not very likely on a commercial Grand Canyon rafting trip, though the risks are there, absolutely. This is a risky trip, and you want to absolutely understand that before going into this, that there are certain risks that although we try really hard to mitigate, we can't always mitigate every single risk, and nature honestly wins sometimes. And so there is still that. But that being said, start watching some YouTube videos. If you just look on YouTube for Grand Canyon rafting, you can look up like Grand Canyon motor trips. You can look up Grand Canyon oar boats and that kind of stuff. Start looking at them because they're just really fun to watch. You can even try to find videos about hiking in Grand Canyon because that is just a really awesome opportunity that only people who raft Grand Canyon get the opportunity to do. There are so many remote locations in Grand Canyon that you can only access from the river, and so it is such a treat to be able to do those hikes, and we as a company love to do that as well. Our goal is to get you off the boats every single day and exploring in the side canyons, exploring the waterfalls, exploring everything you possibly can about Grand Canyon, and not just seeing it from the river. And so I highly recommend that you start looking at YouTube videos and maybe reading blogs on other outfitters' websites or ours in general, and just learn as much as you can. Another thing you can do to start getting excited is to read books about Grand Canyon. The Emerald Mile is a really popular one right now that a lot of people are reading. It's what got the Dories so popular um, because it was a speed run through the Grand Canyon in a dory. And so it's just a really, really fun book. There's lots of geology books you can read about Grand Canyon. There are lots of flora and fauna books that you can read in Grand Canyon. And I will link in the description below our retail store and the books that we sell there, because those are some just really great ones that we have found over the time that people really love to read. So we will absolutely read those. But start getting hyped, start getting really excited, and start doing as much research as you can about the trip in general so you can just continue to be more and more excited every day. Tip number 8, you can do pretty much any time in your process for a reservation, but it is to physically prepare for your adventure. And I cannot stress this enough. This trip in general is risky. It's a difficult trip for anybody, no matter how physically fit you are. There's carrying your gear in and of itself, setting up your campsite every single day, taking it down every single day, helping unload the boats every single day, reloading the boats every single day, going on hikes, which you're basically starting at the bottom of a canyon and going up for almost all of the hikes. Even though there are some where you're just kind of going back into an area, you're going to have elevation gain on pretty much every single hike you're going to do in Grand Canyon. Practice swimming rapids if you want to. This trip in general is just a very physically active trip. You're sleeping outside every single day. You're waking up every single morning to the beautiful, amazing sunrise and everything. And it's an absolutely amazing trip in that way, but it is physically demanding. And so I tell everybody that the more physically fit you can be for these trips, the more enjoyment you're going to get out of it. And if you are hiking in or out and doing either our upper or lower canyon trip, you absolutely need to be in good physical condition to be able to get yourself out of Bright Angel Trail or to get yourself down Bright Angel Trail. I'm going to make a video about this later, more about Bright Angel Trail, like I said earlier. A lot of people assume that hiking in is easier than hiking out, but it's just definitely not the case. Hiking out is obviously more a cardiovascularly difficult hike, but hiking in, going 7.5 miles down constantly takes a beating on your body, and it's amazing how difficult it is for people. In fact, we actually end up seeing most of the issues for people hiking on the Bright Angel Trail for people hiking down than those for hiking out. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind for those of you that might think that hiking is easier. Sometimes it is for some people though, so there is still that for sure. But don't make the assumption that hiking in is going to be easier than hiking out. It's one of those trails that you just want to overestimate the difficulty of it and make sure that you are very prepared for it. Don't underestimate the difficulty of it because it's gonna hurt if you do that. And in general, you don't have to do every single hike that we go on these trips, and I completely understand why some people may not want to. But again, you're down there for this trip to explore Grand Canyon, and so the more hiking that you can do on these trips, the more physically fit you are, the more enjoyment you're going to get out of this hike. And so I can't really stress enough how great it is to be in good physical shape. If you're generally a sedentary person, this trip will be difficult for you. If you are generally a physically active person, then you're going to have a great time on this trip. But no matter where you're at in your physical fitness journey, I recommend upping it a little bit for this trip in general, just so that you can have as much fun on this trip as you can. We also send you, we as an ASRA, we will send you a whole PDF of how to get physically prepared for your trip 8 weeks prior to your trip. And so that's a really great thing to follow because it was actually created by one of our river guides who has now become a physical trainer and a physical therapist. And so it's a really great tool for you to specifically know how to work your body to prepare for this trip. You want to have a strong core, you want to have strong legs, you want to have a good upper body strength for this trip as well. And so working all of those areas in particular are just going to help you have such an amazing adventure. All right. Tip number 9 is to start purchasing gear and start packing. And this is relevant to any type of trip that you're going on, whether any type of rafting trip that you're going to go on. So I highly recommend doing this close to kind of toward the end of your trip, obviously, but also to start getting prepared for it. Start looking up the gear that you're going to need. Again, here at ASRA, we provide you with a packing list, and it is very detailed. And we provide recommendations on like different brands and stuff like that within that packing list. And so you can take that list to like an REI or a store. You can also mark off what things you already own and then what you're going to need to purchase. There's a checklist that's going to be included in that packing list that we provide you too, so you can keep track of all of that stuff. It also includes quantities of things that you're going to want to bring. And so start purchasing your gear. You know, it's definitely with your river shoes and your hiking shoes, you're going to want to purchase those at least 6 months prior to the trip so that you can start breaking them in, because you certainly don't want to do a rafting trip in brand new shoes that you have not broken in yet. So that's definitely something that you want to take advantage of early enough. And for those of you that are going to be hiking in or out on the Bright Angel Trail on either our upper or our lower canyon trip, you're going to need some sort of bigger hiking backpack to carry all of your gear in and out of the trip as well. And so that's something that I would recommend you purchase about 6 months or so prior to, if you have that amount of time prior to your trip, to do that ahead of time so that you can start preparing for that hike in or out with that hiking backpack on and start getting used to the weight of it, start getting used to hiking with that weight on, making sure it fits your body comfortably and all of that stuff. And then for ASRA specifically, we actually have a retail store that we call Red River Sports, and we provide a lot of the essential gear that you need for your trip. So we sell things like carabiners, the rain jackets we recommend, the paddle jackets and paddle pants that we recommend. We sell sarongs so that you don't have to go find one of those in a store near you. And what's really great, and so much more, so much more. And what's really great about that store is that we have that store actually set up at your orientation if you are doing a full canyon or an upper canyon trip. So if you are meeting us in Flagstaff, Arizona for your orientation, we have that store set up at the hotel we use here in Flagstaff. So you can purchase those items last minute at your orientation. You can also purchase those items online at any point in time, and we can ship them out to you, or we can hold them aside for you until your trip, and then you can pick them up at your orientation. And so that's a really, really great thing that we provide to you. And we try really hard to keep all of those essential items as competitively priced as possible so that you don't have to go price searching across the internet for these items. We want to provide you with really good quality items that are at a comparable price so that you can just come to us and trust that what we sell is going to be the best fit for you. So start doing that. And then personally, what I would do is kind of start laying out my different outfits and stuff like that for river outfits, camp outfits. I have like a bag that has all of my underwear in it and my socks in it and stuff like that. And I start just at least laying that stuff out so that I know what I need to have, what quantities I need of more things, and everything in that way. So that's going to be my next tip. And obviously, you can't really start packing until you're closer to the trip, but to just kind of lay things out to get an idea of what that all looks like is going to be super helpful to you. And the dimensions of the dry bags that we provide you on this trip are going to be in the packing list that we provide you. So you'll have a really good idea of how much space and how big those bags are so that you know what's going to fit in there and what isn't. last tip, but absolutely not least, because honestly, this might be one of the most important tips you could do, is to mentally prepare for this adventure of a lifetime. Start thinking about what this adventure is going to be like for you down there. Start thinking about the things you can do and how much fun you can have and how you can like be a kid again in this kind of trip. I have a few recommendations that I want to share with you on how to mentally prepare for this. Is seriously amazing adventure that if you let it will change you. It will change you to your core and remind you of what's truly, truly important in your life. And it takes you back to the basics of kind of survival down there. And there's something really important that that does to our souls. And so I'm going to recommend a few things here that can help you prepare for that. One of those is to leave your watch behind. You don't need it. In fact, like it is so freeing being down there without a watch and without knowing what time it is. You're going to wake up when the sun rises and you're going to go to sleep when the sun goes down. You're going to have lunch sometime in the middle of the day. We're going to go on hikes. Your guides are going to make dinner at some point in time. But you don't need to know what time it is. You don't need to know what time all those things are happening. The guides absolutely carry a watch because they do keep track of time to try to keep some sort of a semblance of a schedule down there. But you do not need to have that responsibility. Leave the watch at home and just enjoy the slow down of the river time. It's one of my biggest recommendations that I've been telling people a lot these days. Also, be open to whatever adventure comes your way. There is adventure around every single corner on these trips, and you just never know what each day is going to bring. I say this a lot, that sometimes your guides will start with plan A and end up on plan Q by the end of the day, and that's okay. They might end up with plan A hike, but they end up on plan Q for where you're going to camp that day. Again, those are things that you just go with the flow, literally with the river flow, and just enjoy it and not stress about it and just be truly in the moment. My other recommendation is to try at least once to sleep under the stars and not in the tent. The Park Service does want us to tell you that you are more protected from insects and bats and things like that if you sleep in a tent, but it is so absolutely spectacular to sleep under the stars and to see the amazing, amazing view of the beautiful night sky with the canyons all around you. It's just like unmatched. There's nothing else like it. And so I'm going to recommend that you at least try it one time on the trip, and then you might end up falling in love with it so much that you end up sleeping outside of the tent and under the stars the whole trip. That's one of my recommendations to you. Go on the hikes. We were just talking about physically preparing for this trip. The more physically prepared you are for this trip, the more you'll get to go on those hikes. And you'll get to really experience and see those side canyons and the beauty that they have to bring to your every single day. It is amazing how different every single hike can look like on these trips. You think you're in this canyon that kind of looks the same everywhere, but every single twist and turn looks different and brings a different view and a different version of the geology that you didn't get to see at river level before, but now you do. And so all of these hikes are just going to take you to these amazingly spectacular locations that you probably can't see any other way. So it's something not to be missed. Do things like helping cook with the meals. It's just one of those things where like one of the things we try really hard to make sure that our guests do on our trip is to be participatory in the trip. And in order to do that, you help out. Help out by helping cook with the meals. You might just end up chopping vegetables and things like that, but it's another time and another opportunity for you to truly participate in this trip, become one with everyone, and just let it be this adventure where you're all in it together, and it's this amazing camaraderie and teamwork that you get to build along the trip. There are going to be some opportunities on any of our trips to do a practice swim in the rapids. And it can be a little bit scary. It's pretty amazing to see how powerful that river is, which you don't necessarily realize it until you're actually in it. But the nice part about doing a practice swim is that you get that feel for the fierceness of the water, and then you also have a better understanding of if you were to accidentally swim, how you would deal with it, how your body would react to it, and how you'd be able to get through it. And so I do recommend taking those practice swims for fun and also for a learning opportunity. There are going to be some waterfalls and locations where you can safely and approved jump into the river from there, or these little areas where you can just like jump into the river from waterfalls. Take those opportunities, like be a kid again. I have this video that we have on our YouTube page where it's showing how much fun we can have at waterfalls, and I just love this video we have of this older gentleman who is just swimming through one of these smaller like riffles types rapids on an actual side stream that we took him on, and he just looks like he's having a blast. He has the most giant smile on his face, and he's just so stoked to be there. And it's like he's a kid again. And I just can't recommend just going in with that kind of spirit enough, understanding and realizing how amazing this adventure is. And if you're only going to do it once, do it all. So those are all of my tips that I have for you to prepare for generally a rafting trip, but also more specifically a Grand Canyon rafting trip. I truly hope that all of this was helpful to you. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe to our channel so you can see more, as I'm going to be doing more and more of these to help you prepare for your Grand Canyon rafting trip and to just help you learn more about Grand Canyon. We really love to be informational here at ASRA, and we want you to feel as prepared as possible for these trips. So until next time, keep on adventuring, and we'll see you later.
Arizona raft adventures take the fun through the white water.